At City Hospital, the morning sun peeked through the windows as nurses changed shifts. Mary White, everyone's favorite nurse, walked in with her neat blue uniform and friendly smile. People called her the kind angel because she was so good with sick patients. She had worked at City Hospital for 8 years, and everyone trusted her completely. That morning felt strange. The third floor, where the very sick patients stayed, was quieter than usual. Jenny Brown, another nurse who had worked with Mary for 3 years, noticed something odd. In the last few months, more patients than normal had died during Mary's shifts. Jenny tried to ignore this thought. After all, Mary was the sweetest person she knew. Old Mr. Smith had come to the hospital yesterday with chest pain. He was doing fine, telling jokes and eating well. Jenny watched as Mary went into his room with his medicine at 10 a.m. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," Mary said cheerfully. "Time for your medicine." Mr. Smith smiled back, not knowing these would be his last moments alive. 2 hours later, alarms started ringing. Mr. Smith couldn't breathe. Doctors rushed in, but Mary just stood in the corner, watching quietly. Despite everyone's efforts, Mr. Smith died. "Sometimes these things just happen," Mary said softly, patting Jenny's shoulder. That evening, while updating patient files on her computer, Jenny's hands started shaking. She had discovered something terrifying. Every month, at least 3 patients died while Mary was working. Last month, it was Mrs. Garcia, who came in with just a fever. Then Mr. Johnson, who was recovering from surgery, and baby Tommy, who was born healthy but suddenly stopped breathing during Mary's night shift. Jenny dug deeper into old records. A year ago, it was Mr. Wilson who died unexpectedly. 6 months ago, twin sisters Emily and Sarah both died on different nights, both times when Mary was working. 3 months ago, a young mother named Lisa died right after giving birth. All these deaths seemed normal at first, but now Jenny saw a pattern. Walking to her car that night, Jenny felt scared. The parking lot was dark, except for a few flickering lights. She heard footsteps behind her and jumped. "Working late, Jenny?" It was Mary's sweet voice. "I saw you looking at old patient files. Finding anything interesting?" Jenny's heart beat fast. "Just checking some old records," she lied, trying to sound normal. "Oh, that's nice," Mary smiled. But her smile looked different now, almost scary. "By the way, did you hear about the new patient in room 302? Poor thing, such a young boy. Tommy Jr., just like baby Tommy from last month. Same name. What a coincidence. I'm taking care of him tomorrow night." Jenny felt cold all over. She watched Mary walk away, still smiling. Getting into her car, Jenny's hands were shaking so much she could barely hold her keys. She had to do something, but what? Mary was loved by everyone. Who would believe that the kind angel could be doing something so evil? What Jenny didn't know was that in her office drawer, Mary kept a small diary. In it were names, lots of names. Some were crossed out, others had dates next to them. Tommy Jr.'s name was there too, not crossed out yet. Below it was another name that made Jenny's blood run cold when she later discovered it. Jenny Brown, too curious. But the biggest shock was still to come. As Jenny drove home, she remembered something else. Her own mother was scheduled to have surgery next week at City Hospital. And guess who was assigned to be her nurse? Mary White, the kind angel, with the sweet smile and the secret diary full of names. The next day would bring even more horrifying discoveries. The truth about Mary White was darker than anyone could have imagined, and time was running out for Jenny to expose it. Because at City Hospital, some angels weren't sent from heaven. They were sent from somewhere much darker. The next morning, Jenny couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mary's diary that she had glimpsed through the office window. Her hands shook as she poured her coffee. She had to get that diary. But Mary's office was always locked. Then Jenny remembered today was Thursday, and every Thursday at 10 a.m., Mary had a 1-hour meeting with hospital managers. At work, Jenny tried to act normal when she saw Mary. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Mary said, touching Jenny's arm. Her touch felt like ice. Jenny nodded quickly and walked away. She watched the clock, 9:55 a.m. Mary grabbed her folder and walked towards the meeting room. Jenny waited 5 more minutes, then walked to Mary's office. Her heart beating fast, Jenny used the spare key she had borrowed from cleaning staff, telling them she needed to leave some papers on Mary's desk. Inside the office, everything was perfectly organized. Too perfect, Jenny thought. She opened the drawer. Nothing. Another drawer. Empty. Then she saw it, hidden behind some files. In the bottom drawer, a small black notebook. Jenny's hands trembled as she opened it. What she found made her feel sick. The diary had dates going back 5 years. Next to each date was a name, and next to each name was a strange code, BP0, or HR0, or RR0. With horror, Jenny realized these meant blood pressure, 0, heart rate, 0, respiratory rate, 0. These were death records. But there was more. Mary had written little notes. "Too noisy," next to Mr. Wilson's name. "Asked too many questions," beside Mrs. Garcia's. "Reminded me of my sister," near baby Tommy's name. Jenny quickly took pictures of every page with her phone. Just then, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Jenny put the diary back and rushed out, nearly running into Bob, the hospital janitor. "Whoa, careful there," he said. Jenny apologized and hurried away. What she didn't see was Bob walking into Mary's office with a worried look. What nobody knew was that Bob wasn't just a janitor. He was Mary's uncle, and he had seen Jenny with the diary. That afternoon, Jenny noticed something strange. Her computer wouldn't turn on. The IT guy said someone had deleted all her files, including the patient records she'd been checking. Then she got a text from an unknown number. "Curious cats don't always land on their feet." At home that night, Jenny tried calling the police, but who would believe her without proof? The diary pictures on her phone were now corrupted. Just black screens. She was about to give up when her phone rang. It was Lisa, a nurse who had quit 6 months ago. "Jenny," Lisa whispered, "I know what Mary's doing. I found out before I left. But there's more, much more. Mary isn't working alone, and Mary White isn't even her real name." Just then, Jenny heard a noise downstairs in her house. She was sure she had locked all the doors. Her phone went dead. Footsteps were coming up the stairs, slow, steady steps, and somewhere in the darkness she heard a familiar sweet voice humming a lullaby. But what happened next would reveal a truth so shocking that it would change everything Jenny thought she knew about Mary, about City Hospital, and about a secret group that had been operating in hospitals across the country for years. The real question wasn't who Mary was. It was who she worked for. Jenny's heart pounded as the footsteps got closer. She quietly slipped into her bathroom, locking the door. The humming grew louder. Then her phone lit up with a text. "Back door now. Trust me. Lisa." Jenny looked at her bathroom window leading to the back porch. It was her only chance. Just as her bathroom door handle started turning, Jenny squeezed through the window. She saw Lisa's car running quietly in the dark. She ran and jumped in. As they drove away, Jenny saw 2 figures in her upstairs window. Mary, and surprisingly, Bob the janitor. "They call themselves the Merciful Ones," Lisa explained as they drove. "I found out about them 6 months ago. They think they're helping people by ending their suffering, even if the people aren't suffering." Mary's real name is Margaret Wells. She was a nurse in 5 other hospitals. Each time, patients died. Each time, she disappeared before anyone caught on. They drove to Lisa's small apartment across town. Inside, Lisa showed Jenny a wall covered with pictures and newspaper clippings. "Look at this," Lisa pointed to an old photo. "This is Mary, or Margaret, 10 years ago at Green Valley Hospital. 20 patients died. And this man next to her." Jenny gasped. It was Bob, but younger, wearing a doctor's coat. Bob isn't just her uncle. He was a doctor until they took away his license for suspicious patient deaths. They worked together, but they're just two members of a bigger group. Lisa pulled out more photos. Jenny recognized some faces. A doctor from the third floor, a pharmacist, even one of the hospital managers. Suddenly, Lisa's phone buzzed. Her face went white. "They found us! We need to move! Now!" But as they rushed to the door, they heard cars pulling up outside. Through the window, they saw Mary and Bob, along with 3 other people Jenny recognized from the hospital. "There's another way out," Lisa whispered, moving a bookshelf to reveal a small door. "Through the basement. It connects to the building next door. I installed it when I first found out about them. Here, take this." She handed Jenny a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Proof, names, records. But Jenny..." Lisa paused. "Be careful who you trust. Some police officers are with them too." They heard the front door being broken down. Lisa pushed Jenny toward the hidden door. "Go! I'll hold them off!" Jenny wanted to argue, but Lisa pushed her through and closed the door. As Jenny crawled through the dark tunnel, she heard voices and a scream above. Tears rolled down her face as she thought of Lisa. Finally reaching the other building, Jenny emerged in a storage room. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Your mother's surgery has been moved up. Tomorrow morning. Special request from her new nurse, Mary White." Jenny felt cold fear grip her heart. She had to save her mother, expose the truth, and stop the merciful ones. But with dirty cops and hospital staff involved, who could she trust? Then she remembered her cousin Jack was an FBI agent. But as she reached for her phone to call him, she saw another message that made her blood freeze. "Looking for Jack? He's here at the hospital. Critical condition. Unfortunate car accident. Don't worry, Nurse Mary will take good care of him." Running through the dark streets, Jenny realized this was bigger than she had ever imagined. Someone very powerful had to be protecting the merciful ones. But why? The answer would lead her to a conspiracy that went far beyond mercy killings, reaching into the highest levels of the healthcare system. And morning was coming fast. Jenny had 2 hours until sunrise. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m., and her cousin Jack was somewhere in the hospital, helpless. She needed help, real help. Then she remembered something. Last month, a young reporter named Tom Parker had been asking questions at the hospital about unusual deaths. Mary had complained about him being too noisy. Using a payphone to avoid being tracked, Jenny called the local newspaper. "Tom Parker's desk," a sleepy voice answered. 20 minutes later, they met behind an old diner. "I've been investigating hospital deaths for months," Tom said, spreading papers on his car hood. "Not just at City Hospital, at hospitals all over the country. But every time I get close, my evidence disappears, and my witnesses," he paused, "they end up as patients." Tom showed Jenny a pattern she hadn't seen before. Rich patients with big insurance policies were dying more often. Their families would sue the hospital, and the cases would be quickly settled with huge payouts. But here's the weird part. Tom pointed to bank records. Half of that money vanishes into offshore accounts. "They're not just killing people," Jenny whispered, finally understanding. "They're making money from their deaths. The lawsuits, the settlements, it's all planned." Tom nodded grimly. "And guess who owns the insurance company that handles all these cases?" "Simon Care Insurance," owned by... Jenny's eyes widened as she saw the photo. It was Simon Wells, Mary's father. But they had no time to dig deeper. Jenny's mother was in danger. Tom had an idea. I know someone at the FBI. Not the local office, someone from Washington. She's been watching Simon Care for months. If we can get proof... Suddenly, bright headlights blinded them. 3 cars surrounded the diner. Jenny and Tom ran through the kitchen past startled night staff. Behind them, they heard familiar voices, Bob and Mary. They escaped through a back window, but as they ran down the alley, a shot rang out. Tom fell. "Go!" he shouted, throwing Jenny his phone. "Password is Truth 2024. Everything's on there. My FBI contact is named Sarah Chen. Find her!" Jenny ran, tears streaming down her face, clutching the phone. Another friend lost to the merciful ones. Using Tom's phone, Jenny found an encrypted email from Sarah Chen. The message was shocking. The FBI had been watching the merciful ones for years, but every time they got close, key witnesses would die in accidents, or judges handling the cases would suddenly retire after receiving huge deposits in their accounts. But the biggest shock was a photo attached to the email. It showed a young Mary, maybe 20 years younger, standing next to Jenny's father. They were wearing doctor's coats, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Project Mercy, Initial Team 1999. Jenny's father had died in a car crash when she was young, or at least that's what her mother had told her. Now, racing against time, Jenny had to face impossible questions. Was her father part of the merciful ones? Did her mother know? Was her father's death really an accident? And most importantly, how could she save both her mother and Jack when the very hospital meant to heal people had become a killing ground? Dawn was breaking. In 1 hour, her mother would be wheeled into surgery. But what Jenny didn't know was that someone else was waking up too. Someone who had been watching everything from the shadows. Someone who knew the real truth about Project Mercy and why it had to be stopped at any cost. Running out of time, Jenny rushed to the hospital through a back entrance she knew from her night shifts. The morning shift was starting, and nurses hurried past with coffee cups and tired eyes. Her mom would be in pre-op room 4, but as Jenny turned the corner, she crashed into someone. Dr. Sarah Chen, FBI badge hidden under her white coat. "I got here as soon as I could," Sarah whispered, pulling Jenny into a supply closet. "Tom contacted me before they got him. But Jenny, there's something you need to know about your father. He wasn't just part of Project Mercy. He tried to stop it." Sarah showed Jenny an old video on her phone. It showed Jenny's father, Dr. David Brown, arguing with Simon Wells. "We created Project Mercy to help terminal patients die peacefully, not to murder people for insurance money," her father shouted. The video ended with Simon Wells making a threat. "Either you're with us, or you'll join our patients." 2 days later, your father's car crashed, Sarah explained. But what everyone missed was this. She showed Jenny a photo of her father's wrecked car. On the door handle was a tiny needle mark, the same type Mary used on patients. Suddenly, they heard the PA system. Pre-op for Helen Brown beginning in 5 minutes. Jenny's mother. They rushed to pre-op room 4, but it was empty. "Looking for someone?" a sweet voice asked. Mary stood behind them, still smiling that terrible smile. But she wasn't alone. With her was Jenny's mother, awake, unharmed, and smiling too. "Mom?" Jenny's voice shook. "What's going on?" "Oh, honey." Her mother's face was sad. "I was hoping you wouldn't get involved. Just like your father, always trying to fix things." She pulled out a small syringe. "Mary, do you remember when David started causing trouble? I had to make that call. My own husband. But Project Mercy was too important." Jenny felt the floor spin. Her own mother had ordered her father's death? "Why?" was all she could whisper. "Because sometimes mercy isn't enough," her mother explained calmly. Hospitals were closing. Insurance companies were losing money. Project Mercy found a solution. The dying get peace. Insurance companies get their money back through lawsuits. Hospitals get donations from guilty families, and everyone wins. Except the patients who didn't need to die, Sarah said, reaching for her gun. But Bob had appeared behind her, pressing something sharp against her back. More hospital staff surrounded them, nurses, doctors, even the old lady who ran the gift shop. "Take them to the old psych ward," Jenny's mother ordered. "No one goes there anymore. Such a shame. 2 more young women with tragic suicidal tendencies, just like poor Lisa." As they were led away, Jenny noticed something odd. Mary wasn't smiling anymore. She was looking at an old photo in her hand, the same one from the diary. But now Jenny could see the whole image. In it, a young Mary stood with her arm around a patient, Jenny's father. And written on the back were words that would change everything. "To Margaret, all my love. I'll always choose mercy over money. David." The truth was even darker than anyone had imagined. But in the abandoned psych ward, as Jenny and Sarah were locked away, they didn't know that someone else was hidden in the shadows. Someone who had been playing both sides all along, waiting for this moment. And in exactly 10 minutes, everything at City Hospital was about to change forever. In the dark psych ward, Jenny and Sarah sat handcuffed to old hospital beds. The room smelled of dust and forgotten memories. But Jenny noticed something. Mary kept looking at them strangely, touching the old photo in her pocket. Finally, Mary sent Bob away, with an excuse about checking other rooms. As soon as Bob left, Mary rushed to them, speaking quickly. "I loved your father, Jenny. We were going to expose Project Mercy together, but then," she wiped tears, "your mother found out. She didn't just kill David. She's been blackmailing me for years. She has my daughter, Emily. They told me they'd hurt her if I didn't help them." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mary quickly pretended to check their handcuffs as Bob returned. But he had heard everything. "Well, well," he smirked, "the angel has fallen." He raised his phone to call Jenny's mother, but suddenly froze. Behind him stood the last person anyone expected. The old gift shop lady, Mrs. Peters, holding a gun. 20 years, Mrs. Peters said, her sweet grandma act gone. 20 years I've been undercover for the FBI, selling those awful teddy bears, watching Project Mercy grow, waiting for proof. She tossed Sarah a key for the handcuffs. "Agent Peters, by the way, Sarah's boss." But they had bigger problems. Overhead speakers crackled. "Attention all staff! New protocol effective immediately. Project Clean Slate beginning in 10 minutes. All personnel proceed to emergency exits." Mary went pale. "Clean slate? No, no, no. They're going to kill everyone. Patients, witnesses, everyone. The whole hospital is rigged with gas lines. Your mother designed it years ago as a failsafe." They ran to the security office. On screens, they watched nurses and doctors who weren't part of Project Mercy, helping patients evacuate, thinking it was just a drill. But all exit doors were slowly closing, controlled, from somewhere in the hospital. "The main control room," Mary said. "In the basement, but Helen will be there. And Simon Wells is flying in. He's landing on the roof in 5 minutes." Jenny felt a strange calm. Mom always said I was just like Dad, always trying to fix things. Time to prove her right. She turned to Mary. "Where's your daughter Emily really being held?" "The pediatric ward, disguised as a long-term patient. Room 502. Mary's voice shook. "But there are guards." "Agent Peters, can you get Emily out?" Jenny asked. The old lady smiled, checking her gun. "Honey, I've been wanting to stop selling teddy bears for 20 years. Just watch me." They split up. Peters to save Emily, Sarah to stop Simon Wells on the roof, and Jenny and Mary to face Helen in the basement. As they ran downstairs, Mary grabbed Jenny's arm. "There's one more thing you need to know about your father. He left something hidden in the hospital, Something that could expose everything. Your mother's been searching for it for years. What is it? Jenny asked. Mary pulled out the old photo and turned it over. Below David's love note were numbers, coordinates. The real insurance records, account numbers, videos of Project Mercy meetings. It's all hidden in the one place Helen would never look. Where? Your father's grave. Mary's eyes were serious. But Jenny, it's not your father in that grave. Suddenly, gas started hissing through the vents. They had minutes before the whole hospital would be filled. But the biggest shock was still coming, because someone else was heading to the basement too. Someone who had been playing everyone from the start. And they were carrying a truth that would shake Project Mercy to its core. Racing down the basement stairs, Jenny and Mary covered their faces as gas seeped through vents. They heard Agent Sarah's voice on their borrowed radio. Simon Wells is down. His helicopter won't be landing. Mrs. Peters has Emily. They're safe outside, but you've got another problem. Bob disappeared. The basement was like a maze of dark corridors. Following Mary's lead, they reached the control room door. Inside, they heard voices. Jenny's mother wasn't alone. They peered through the small window and saw Helen arguing with someone in the shadows. It's time to end this, Helen, a familiar voice said. Jenny gasped. It was Bob. But he sounded different, confident in charge. He stepped into the light, no longer looking like a simple janitor. Project Mercy was supposed to be about helping people. Look what you turned it into. Helen laughed. Oh, please. You helped build this, Robert. Or should I say, Dr. Robert Brown? Jenny's heart stopped. Robert Brown, her father's brother, her uncle, the man she'd known only from old photos, who supposedly died years ago. I created Project Mercy with David to help terminal patients, Bob said. Then you and Simon twisted it into a money scheme. You killed my brother when he tried to stop you, made me watch, forced me to pretend to be a janitor all these years to protect Jenny. And you played your part so well. Helen smiled coldly. The bumbling janitor, Mary's fake uncle. But now, she pressed a button and more gas poured in. Time for a family reunion. In heaven. Jenny couldn't wait anymore. She burst in, Mary behind her. It's over, Mom. The FBI has Emily. Simon Wells is caught, and we found Dad's evidence. But Helen just smiled wider. Jenny, you really are your father's daughter, always rushing in without seeing the whole picture. She pulled out an old flash drive. You mean this evidence? From the grave that doesn't hold your father? Then where is he? Jenny demanded. If that's not him in the grave, where's my father? The gas was getting thicker. Mary stumbled, coughing. Bob tried to reach the control panel, but Helen pulled out a gun. And then, from the doorway, came another voice, weak, raspy, like it hadn't been used in years. I'm right here, sweetheart. Everyone turned. There, in a wheelchair, sat an old security guard Jenny had seen every day for years. The quiet man who always smiled at her, who watched everything but said nothing. Beneath his gray beard and scars, Jenny finally saw it, her father's eyes. But before anyone could move, the room plunged into darkness. When emergency lights flickered on, they revealed a scene no one was prepared for. Because in that moment, someone had finally made their move. Someone who had been waiting 20 years for revenge. And what happened next would change everything they thought they knew about Project Mercy. In the red glow of emergency lights, Jenny saw Mary holding Helen at gunpoint. But Mary wasn't looking at Helen. She was looking at Jenny's father, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, David. All these years watching you in that wheelchair, not being able to say anything. You knew, Jenny whispered. You knew he was alive? She didn't just know. Helen laughed, despite the gun at her head. Tell them, Margaret, tell them who really started Project Mercy, before David, before Robert. Who had the original idea? Mary's hand shook. It was me, she confessed. I was a young nurse, tired of watching terminal patients suffer. I created Project Mercy to help them die peacefully. Then I met David. He was kind, brilliant. He helped make it legal, ethical. But then Simon Wells offered to fund us, and Helen, Mary's voice broke. Helen saw a way to make millions. The gas was getting thicker. Bob tried reaching for the ventilation controls, but Helen shot at him, missing barely. Nobody moves! You want to know the real story? David didn't just try to stop us. He found a way to bring Project Mercy down. A list of every patient, every illegal death, every bank transaction. He hid copies everywhere, in his grave, in hospital records, even in his old office. But the master list... She pulled out a small key. It's in a safety deposit box, and only I know where. Suddenly the lights went out completely. They heard a struggle, a gunshot, then silence. When the lights flickered back on, Helen was gone. The gas was turning off. Someone had hit the emergency stop. The evidence! David spoke from his wheelchair. His voice stronger now. Helen's wrong. The master list isn't in a safety deposit box. He looked at Jenny. It's in your locket, the one I gave you on your 10th birthday. The one you've worn every day since I died. The microchip inside contains everything. Jenny touched the heart-shaped locket she never took off. All these years, she'd been wearing the evidence that could bring down Project Mercy. But there was no time to process this. Mom's getting away! She started toward the door. No, Mary said firmly. Your father needs to get to safety. Agent Peters and Sarah will handle Helen. Jenny, there's something else you need to know. About why your mother really started all this. About what happened the night your father died. Before Mary could continue, they heard footsteps running away down the corridor. But it wasn't Helen. It was Bob, clutching something in his hand. On the floor where he had been standing was a familiar black diary. He's not running away, David said, understanding dawning on his face. He's finishing what we started 20 years ago. Today isn't just the day Project Mercy ends. He looked at Jenny meaningfully. It's the day the real truth comes out. About why your mother turned against us. About who Emily's father really is. And about the other Project Mercy. The one your mother didn't know about. As they rushed after Bob, David wheeled himself surprisingly fast, leading them to an old elevator, one Jenny had never noticed before. The hospital was built in 1960, he explained, pressing a hidden button. But beneath it, there's something else. The elevator descended deeper than Jenny thought possible. When the doors opened, they saw a long white hallway lined with rooms. Through glass windows, they saw people, patients, all sleeping peacefully. But something was different about them. Welcome to the real Project Mercy, David said softly. Every person your mother and Simon thought they killed, they're here. We saved them, gave them new identities, the bodies in their graves. Unclaimed patients who died naturally. We couldn't save everyone, but we tried. Mary touched the glass, crying, Emily! She isn't just my daughter, Jenny. She's your sister. Your father and I, we were going to expose Helen together, run away. But then Helen found out about us, about Emily. She threatened to kill the baby unless I helped her. Your father faked his death to protect us all. Jenny's head spun. A sister? All these saved people? But before she could process this, they heard Helen's voice echo through speakers. David, you clever man. All these years, right under my feet. But did you really think I never knew? Alarm bells started ringing. Gas chambers work down there too. They ran through the hallway, waking patients, helping them to emergency exits Bob was opening. Jenny saw familiar faces. Mr. Wilson, who died last year. Mrs. Garcia, even baby Tommy. All alive, all hidden by her father and uncle. Jenny, Bob called from a room at the end. You need to see this. Inside, screens covered the walls, surveillance footage from every hospital where Project Mercy operated. And there was Helen, in her office 20 years ago, talking to someone Jenny recognized from news headlines, the CEO of the country's biggest hospital chain. It was never just about insurance money, Bob explained. Helen and Simon were testing something for big hospital corporations, a way to eliminate expensive long-term patients, make hospitals more profitable. Project Mercy was their cover. Suddenly, the screen showed current footage. Helen in the hospital parking garage, running to a car. But she wasn't alone. The CEO was with her, and they had the master list Helen had claimed was in a safety deposit box. If they get away with that list, they'll delete all evidence of the bigger conspiracy, David said urgently. Everything we've worked for. Then they heard a calm voice behind them. They won't get away. It was Agent Peters holding her gun steady. But she wasn't looking at the screens. She was looking at Mary. Because Margaret here isn't just a nurse. Show them, Mary. Mary reached into her pocket and pulled out a badge. FBI Special Operations, dated 25 years ago. I wasn't just starting Project Mercy back then, she said quietly. I was investigating hospital deaths. I fell in love with David, yes. But my mission was always to bring down the corporate killing machine. And today, it ends. But as sirens wailed above and agents surrounded the hospital, no one noticed a small red light blinking on Helen's old office computer. Because the biggest twist in this story wasn't about who would win. It was about what would be unleashed if they did. Something called Protocol Zero was about to begin. And not even Mary knew what it meant. As police sirens filled the air, Agent Peters' phone buzzed. Her face went pale. They've initiated Protocol Zero, she said. Every hospital computer in the country just received encrypted orders. Every Project Mercy member is being activated. David wheeled to the old computer, typing frantically. It's worse than that. Protocol Zero isn't just about killing patients. Show them, Mary. Show them what Helen really built. Mary pulled up files on another screen. What they saw was terrifying. A list of thousands of people, not just patients. Judges who might investigate Project Mercy, reporters who ask questions, even children of potential whistleblowers, all marked as future patients. Helen didn't just run Project Mercy, Mary explained, her FBI training showing in her voice. She created a sleeper cell network. Nurses, doctors, staff in every major hospital. One command from her and they all start Mercy killings. Imagine, thousands of unexpected deaths in one day. The healthcare system would collapse. The only solution would be to let the big hospital corporations take control. Bob finished. Total control over who lives and who dies. They'd call it healthcare reform after such a tragedy. Suddenly, Helen's face appeared on all screens. She was smiling. That same cold smile Jenny's mother had always used when she knew she'd won. David, my dear husband, you saved a few hundred people? I'm about to save the whole healthcare system. Sometimes you need a few thousand deaths to force change. Jenny looked at her locket, then at her father. The evidence in here. Can it stop Protocol Zero? If we can upload it to the main hospital network, David nodded, but Helen's locked us out of all computers. That's when they heard a small voice. Not all computers. Emily, Jenny's newfound sister, stood in the doorway. Mom taught me everything about hospital systems. Been practicing from my sickbed for years. While Helen was giving her victory speech on screens, Emily slipped Jenny's locket into a hidden port. Her small fingers flew over the keyboard, but they needed more time. Helen's voice was counting down. Protocol Zero activating in 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, every screen went black. Then new images appeared. Video proof of every Project Mercy crime, every corporate meeting, every secret deal. It was broadcasting to every hospital computer in the country. They'd done it. But Helen just laughed harder. You still don't understand. Protocol Zero isn't in the computers. Look behind you. They turned. Through the glass walls, they saw every saved patient sitting up in bed, eyes open but empty. I found your secret ward months ago, Helen's voice echoed. Been giving them special vitamins. One command from me, and the drugs activate. They become killing machines, starting with their saviors. Poetic, isn't it? The patients were standing now, moving like zombies toward the doors. Jenny looked at her father, at her newfound sister, at Mary, her other mother. They were trapped underground, surrounded by the very people they'd tried to save. But what no one knew was that Jenny had one more secret, one even Helen hadn't discovered, because the locket held something else, something her father had given her that last day before his death. And it was about to change everything. Everyone, stand behind me. Jenny stepped forward, opening her locket in a different way. Not the computer chip side, but a hidden third compartment. Inside was a tiny blue button. Dad didn't just give me evidence that day. He gave me a kill switch. No! Helen's voice crackled through speakers. That's impossible. You forgot who designed the original Project Mercy drugs, Helen. David smiled proudly. Before you twisted everything, I created both the control drug and its antidote. One push, and every patient gets cured. Jenny pressed the button. Around them, the zombie-like patients stopped walking. They blinked, looked around confused, then started becoming themselves. Again. But Helen wasn't done. Fine, they're awake. But I'm still getting away with the master list. Good luck proving anything. Helen's voice was getting distant. She was running. Actually, Mom, Jenny smiled, you should look at your phone. Helen's scream of rage echoed through the building. Emily had done more than just upload evidence. She'd hacked every device connected to the hospital network. The proof was now everywhere. Social media, news websites, even the phones of those corporate CEOs Helen worked with. Upstairs, they heard chaos. FBI agents were arresting doctors and nurses involved in Project Mercy. The CEO trying to escape with Helen was already in handcuffs. And there, being led out in chains, was Simon Wells, caught by Agent Sarah on the roof. But Helen herself was still missing. They found her in the last place anyone expected, the hospital chapel. She wasn't running anymore. She was sitting quietly, looking at an old photo. You want to know the real reason I started this? Helen asked as Jenny approached. Your father and I had another child before you. She died waiting for an expensive treatment. Our insurance wouldn't cover. I wanted to change the system. But somewhere, I became the very thing that killed her. As police led Helen away, Jenny looked at her strange new family. Her father in his wheelchair, Mary the FBI agent who loved him, Emily her secret sister, Uncle Bob, who protected them all, and Agent Peters, who watched over everything for decades. So what happens now? Emily asked, holding Jenny's hand. Now, David smiled, we build the real Project Mercy. What it was always supposed to be. Helping people live, not deciding who dies, and we do it together. 1 month later, City Hospital had a new name, new management, and a new secret floor, but this time, it wasn't hiding saved patients. It was a free care unit for those who couldn't afford treatment. The sign above the door read, "The David Brown Mercy Ward, where everyone gets a second chance." Jenny still worked there as a nurse, along with Mary. Her father ran the ward from his wheelchair, finally free to be himself. Emily, now in medical school, visited between classes. Uncle Bob quit playing janitor and became the hospital's head of security. making sure nothing like Project Mercy ever happened again. And Jenny's locket? She gave it to the Smithsonian, where it sits in a display about one of the biggest medical conspiracies in history. But she kept the blue button, just in case, because as her father always said, real mercy isn't about ending life. It's about saving it.